So today we are going to be moving over to the second half of the data and systems topic. We of course have been focusing quite cleanly and closely on data for the first part of it. We've of course looked at essentially what data is and why data is important and what it means to be a holder of data and other important information. And for the second half of the topic, as you've probably guessed, we are going to be focusing on systems. So, we're going to be learning about basically what a system is today, and they work sort of hand in hand with the data that we already have in order to do a whole range of other things. So we're going to be focusing in on those today, and we also are going to introduce your last assessment task for the year, which is going to be based around this systems part of the course. So more specifically today, we're going to have a look at information systems. We'll talk about what they are, what they consist of, and how they are made up. We're also going to have a look at some examples of a particular type of transaction so that we can kind of get into our head in a bit of an idea of what these systems are all about and how they essentially work together. And then we're going to talk about task 4, what you're going to need to do for task 4, as well as when it's going to be due and all of that type of thing as we lead up towards the end of the year. So to begin with, let's learn what an information system is. So essentially, an information system, which which for what the topic is called is basically we can shorten to system as well, is a system of people and computers that process information for a specific purpose. Now that is a very, very general definition there. These systems can be very large or very small. And when thinking about an information system, we need to think about all of the people, procedures, software, hardware, and data that is used in order to make that system work. So that's very general to begin with. It's obviously going to become a lot more clearer what an information system is as we go on. Essentially, we can sort of view them in two different stages. We have data, which of course we already are familiar with, and we know all about how data works and why it's important and all of those types of things that we have seen over the last few weeks. But essentially, all data comes together into systems. That's essentially what you've got to what we need to understand. So we have all this data that is available. We have collected data in some form of in some case. And then it all comes together into the system. So you can kind of view the system as the thing that basically holds all the data together, and the people can then go into that data and access it and use it for a particular purpose. So that's essentially the role of an information system. It kind of stores and structures all of the data that we are collecting. So if we just go and ask someone a survey question, and we basically just put all that data, just leave that in the survey and we don't do anything with it, then it's obviously going to be unorganized. But if we actually use a system to have a look at that data and we try and do some analysis on that data, we store all of the records, we put it there for a particular reason, we then use maybe the email addresses to send out some emails, we might use the person's personal details for some reason as well. That is when we're actually going to be using that data in the form of an information system. So that's crucially what the information system is going to be all about. So essentially, though, information systems are built up of 5 parts. There's 5 key parts, which are the procedures, the people, the software, the hardware, and the data. And all of these will interact in order to form what is known as the information system. So all of these things essentially is what the information system is built up of. So essentially, we can initially think of an information system as a computer program. So we've got, this data, we put it somewhere, and then it's basically all nice and neatly stored so that we can access it and use it later on. But it's not just the computer program, there's lots of other things we need to think about involved in that system as well. We obviously also have the data itself. we have the hardware that is used to access that data, we have the people who are using the data for various means, and we also have procedures built in that allow us to do various things with our data as well. So all of these form very important parts in our overall information system. And what we're going to do to start with here is we're going to have a look at all of these in a little bit more detail so that we can understand what these things are. So first one we're going to talk about is probably the most important, which is the people themselves. So people are very important in terms of information systems because really without the people, the information system cannot work. So we really need the people to be driving and using the data for a particular purpose. So why is it that we've got this data sitting there? You know, if we just basically put all this data into the computer, that's all well and good, but in order for it to actually get some information that we can then use, we need people to essentially drive that. So data by itself is essentially really useless. Although we might have collected this data and it could be meaningful to people in the future, if we just have data sitting there and there's no human interaction with it, there's really nothing that we can actually do, or there's nothing that the computer is going to do by itself. We need the people to drive, what have we collected this data for and what can we use it for. And it's not just in the actual computer program itself that we see the people involved. We see that along the way there's lots of people involved in even doing things like collecting the data, making sure that the data is going to be there, and even in the daily processes that makes the data actually get to that point as well. On top of that, we also have procedures. So procedures are things that basically can go one of two ways. We can have procedures that are ones that the human person will follow and ones that the computer will follow as well. So as we know, of course, people will follow set procedures to make sure that the information system works. So if we view the information system as a computer program, there's going to be a way that we need to follow in order to make sure that the information system does actually work correctly. So that could be, for example, by learning how to use the program. So we might be told, okay, well, here's where our information system is. This is how you access the data. This is how you use the data, and learning those correct operations as well. It also can be, maybe things that you learn yourself. So, or maybe you might be following a guideline. So maybe you might have instructions of what to do. Go into the system, do this, do that, and then that will be a procedure that will allow you to do certain things with your data, or maybe enter data into the system as well. But procedures can also refer to the procedures that the computer has to follow. So essentially, if it's a computer program that is running all of this, the computer program is going to be programmed in a certain way so that it has to follow certain instructions and it has to do certain things as well. So it's not just the people involved in the procedures, it's the computer as well. Now, the next two parts of the information system are often grouped together. These are called the software and the hardware, and they both are very important parts of information systems, and they're also important parts of any computer system as well. Does anybody know the difference between software and hardware before we move on? Declan saying no. Kayla's put a question mark up. Anybody else? Hardware and software? Doesn't look like anybody's sure. We'll start by revealing what software is, and then we'll see if we can make a judgment based on what software is about what hardware is. Now, these are both very important parts in any computer system, not just an information system, but any computer system as a whole. So any computer system does need software and hardware essentially in order to run. Essentially, software is another word for computer programs. So if we're talking about software, we're talking about the programs that are on the computer itself. And when we think although we're using the word computer here, it's important to note that although computer, you probably think about a desktop computer or a laptop, this can refer to mobile phone programs or apps. It can refer to tablets as well. So they are, of course, different types of computers. But they are slightly different to how we might picture it here. Essentially, the role of software is that it tells the computer how to process data into the form that the user wants. So we have this data to begin with that's fairly useless. We then need to obviously do something with it, so we put it into some information system software or into our computer system software, and that allows us to do various things with our data. So any program that helps us to organize our data is going to be the software that we use as part of our information system. So that is essentially the software. Now, Rosie did make a suggestion just before we did get into this that I did miss. She did ask if software is the program and would hardware be the security behind the things. You are kind of you obviously were right with the software there, Rosie, but the hardware is something slightly different here. So now that we've learned that the software is the computer programs and basically the things internal to the computer, can anybody make a guess about what the hardware might be? So we've learned that it's not security. It can't be computer programs. So what else about our computer could be the hardware? Go ahead, Declan.
Maybe like the actual internals, like the actual processes and things like that.
Okay, that's one possible suggestion. So the internal things in the computer itself. Yep, possibility. Anybody else got any suggestions? Rosie suggested the frame of the computer or maybe the outer protection. You're both kind of on the right track here, but you're not exactly right what we're talking about. There's a more specific thing that hardware basically encompasses. So essentially, if we look at it, hardware is essentially the computer equipment. So if you view software, software is computer programs, hardware is computer equipment. So one way that we basically try and categorize hardware is we say that it's anything that you can physically touch related to your computer. So that can mean actually a whole range of things. It does mean the frame of the computer or the outer protection, like you suggested, Rosie. It does mean some of those internal things that you talked about there, Declan. But it also means a lot of other things as well. Headphones, mouse, keyboards, cables, all of those things are going to be computer hardware. They basically work with the software on the computer in order to do things on our computer. So the computer programs, obviously allow us to do things when the computer is on and when it's running, but the hardware is the thing that actually kind of runs the whole computer system. So they kind of are independent of each other, but we need them both in order to make our computer to work. If we had the software, we can't have software without having hardware. So we need to have the actual physical computer and all the things that we can use in order to actually run the software. And the hardware won't do anything unless we have software to run it. So they both kind of are, need each other to actually work. Hardware's actual role is to process data in order to create information. So essentially what we're doing is we're using various things to help us to do that goal. So of course, we need a mouse and a keyboard to interact with a computer system. So, if we don't have that, then essentially we have no interaction with our data that might be stored on the computer system. So we need the hardware to help us to do it. And as I've just mentioned, hardware consists of every physical computer part from everything from a monitor to speakers to a printer. Anything that we can physically touch is going to be part of our computer hardware. And all of them are going to have their own role in the information system. Some of them are going to be very important, like, the keyboard and the mouse to help us to interact with things. Other things are going to be an important part of the system as well. Even things like the printer. The printer would allow us to print information out, or the monitor would allow us to display things on the screen. So there's lots of things always that we do need to think about when we are thinking about hardware. And the final one is one that we should be fairly familiar with. The final piece of the information system is the data itself. And this is, of course, any piece of information gathered by the information system. So data could be things like customer details, order records, school reports, phone numbers, email addresses, how many burgers have been sold today. All of those things are different forms of data and they all tell us slightly different pieces of information. So depending on the type of information system that we have is going to depend on what type of data we collect. So a burger, a place that makes burgers are probably going to be quite concerned about how many burgers have been sold today. But a school is not, because they're not going to sell burgers. A school's going to be more interested with things like, parent details, school reports, those type of things. So depending on what type of data we have depending on what type of data we need is going to depend on the type of data that we actually have. And it's important to note that many information systems are set up and rely on the data that they collect. So we can think about information systems that, it is really, really important to keep that data and make sure that that data is correct and accurate. And we've already spoken about earlier on the need for making accurate data and why data should be accurate and why, of course, we should keep it secure and fulfill all of our various responsibilities as well. So of course, a school's not going to be able to run unless it has certain data. So we need to make sure that we have that data in the system so that we can access it at any time. So that's essentially the 5 parts of the information system. As we've just discussed there, we have the people, the procedures, the software, the hardware, and the data. And all of them interact in order to help form the information system. So it's important to not think of the information system as just one individual computer program. What we are thinking about instead is we're thinking about this whole kind of business or school that basically brings all this data together for this particular purpose. So there's much more to it than just thinking about one particular thing and thinking about the data that we might have collected. So let's have a look at an example here, and it looks like for some reason it's been cut, my text has been cut off here behind the picture. But anyway, we'll get the idea here. So let's think of an example here. Let's imagine that we are buying something online. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this as an example. Although this is going to be part of an information system, we're kind of only going to view it a bit more small scale here to think about what we might be doing in each case. So let's just imagine buying something online is an information system. So we can view that as any website. We could be buying something off just a particular website that we like to go on. It might be Amazon, it might be eBay, it might be any one of those websites. So we're buying something online. We need to think about all of these things and how they're going to interact in order to help us complete our purchase. So let's first of all start with the people. What people are going to be involved with you buying something online? And don't just think about the people involved in the purchase or involved on the computer. Think about everybody. Who's going to be involved in this purchase that you're making? Go ahead, Declan.
Oh, obviously there's going to be lots of people if you're considering everyone, because like your bank transfers the money, then the people are making the product, make the product, and like the mail people bring it to you, and like there's lots of different things.
Yeah, exactly. So we can think about the bank who might give you the money, the people who might actually make the product, and anybody may be involved in that business that you might have bought it off. Um, Anybody who made the item as well, if it's a separate person, the people who help post it to you as well. Darcy has also suggested, the most important person involved in this, which is yourself. You are a person involved in this information system as well. Anybody involved in the company or the website as well. So those are definitely going to be the people that are going to be involved. And there are going to be lots, so we can view, if we can think about, maybe let's imagine eBay as an information system. So we go onto eBay, we provide information, the seller will provide, provide us a service for giving us that information. We give them money and we give them an address and details. They will send us something for a price. So that's basically like an information system all coming together there. But there's lots more people involved in than there's obviously eBay's involved in it, the seller, the buyer, all the people who ship it around. There's going to be a whole range of different people who are involved there. So some of the things we've just mentioned are on this next slide here. People involved: yourself, your bank to try and give you that money, anyone in the business that you're actually buying from. Also, anyone who made the item that you bought is going to be involved in that. And anyone who helps to send the item you bought to you as well. So people at the post office, people who are couriers like FedEx and people like that. They're going to be involved in this information system, although they've had absolutely nothing to do with the purchase itself. They just get the information off the system and they'll read, okay, this person here who lives at this address needs this parcel, and they're going to use their system in order to make sure that that parcel gets to your doorstep. So lots and lots of different people involved. Now the procedures might be a little bit less clear, so we'll go through these together. So there's going to be a procedure involved in you actually going onto the website and actually making the purchase. So you're going to go through, you're going to click the buttons needed to say, I want to buy this particular item. You might need to fill out your details if you haven't done so already. And then you're going to submit it, using your bank account or using your money in order to make that a purchase. So you're going to basically follow through certain steps in order to do that. There's also going to be a procedure involved in sending the item to you. So once the item gets, once it gets alerted that you have bought this item, it's then going to be put, somewhere, and it's then going to be sent to you using, post or couriers or whatever it is. And there's going to be certain procedures involved in making sure that that item actually arrives on your doorstep as well. And there's clearly going to be, from the computer point of view, several procedures on the website to make sure that the correct data is sent and received. So we need to make sure that that the person's address does go to the seller of the item, and make sure, of course, the money gets transferred as well correctly. Then, of course, that data then needs to go on to whoever is going to be sending the item to you, and then the item, of course, is going to go to your door. But all that data needs to be shared around somehow. So there's got to be a procedure involved in making sure that that data actually does get into the right hands, and it doesn't just go to some random person who intercepts all of that data. So we learned earlier that software is the computer programs, essentially. That's another word for computer programs. So what software would be involved in making a purchase online? What's going to be the main one to start with? So there's going to be one program that we're clearly going to use in order to make a purchase online. Go ahead again, Declan.
The internet.
Okay, more specifically than the internet. What's the thing that we use to get onto the internet? Can anybody help Declan out? What program do we use to get onto the internet? We use these every day. Thank you, Darcy. We use a web browser. So there's going to be various web browsers that would allow us to get onto the internet and make that purchase. So clearly, of course, we do use the internet, so you were right there, Declan, but just more specifically than that, we need a web browser to get on. Now, depending on what type of device we're using, there could also be other things that we could use. So if we were making a purchase, for example, on a tablet or on a phone, we might go through an app. So for example, for dinner tonight, I might decide I want to get takeaway. So if I decide I wanted to get takeaway, I could maybe go onto onto an app like Domino's or Pizza Hut, and I could put my details through the app in order to get a pizza delivered to my house, if that's what I wanted to do for dinner. So it's not necessarily just a web browser, there also are apps that could do these things as well. So that's the first thing. There's going to be that's going to be one piece of software involved. There also is likely to be at the store that you have actually purchased from some form of inventory program. Because if you imagine these large stores, your Amazons, not necessarily just your small-time eBay sellers, but your larger stores like your Amazon, that are worldwide. There's going to be lots and lots of different things that are going to be in the store, and they clearly need to keep track of what they've got and what they don't have. What they don't want to have is somebody order something online and then they go to their thing and then they realize, oh wow, we don't have any of these. We sold out of those 6 months ago. So clearly, there's going to be something that they're going to use in order to keep track of how many items that they actually have. So they're going to have a piece of software that would help them to do that. You would assume they're not going to be using a pen and paper to work out how many of each thing they still have. And also, there's going to be some software probably used in the sending process. So if you've ever signed for an item at the door, you'll have noticed that they basically ask for a signature that goes into the system, and that basically says that that item has been signed for. They print off barcodes to send things around, and so that they know where certain things are going. So there's going to be software used in the sending process as well, and that's going to make sure that that item is going to arrive at the person's door. So, recapping there, we're going to have a web browser, we're going to have an inventory program at the store, and there's going to be software used in the sending process as well. And as I mentioned, there's, failing a web browser, we can also use specific apps on our mobile devices as well. So you can see that although initially you might think, okay, well, what software do we use to make a purchase? And you might just immediately think about, okay, well, we're going to log on to the internet and use a web browser. You can see that involved in that, there's a lot more to it than that. So we do need to think, in this topic specifically, we need to sort of broaden our thinking a little bit more and think about some of the other things that we might forget if we don't, if we do stay a little bit more narrow-minded. Next, we have the hardware that would be involved, and obviously the hardware is going to involve a lot of different things as well. So the hardware would involve your computer or your mobile device and all hardware connected to that. So, your computer or device is going to maybe have a mouse and a keyboard, maybe other things that you might use like a monitor to help you see the purchase. So you're going to use that's going to be, obviously allow you that purchase to actually go ahead and happen. There's going to be a server at the business you bought from, and computers also used to find and send the item to you. So they're obviously going to have their own computer system that is going to be involved here, all the hardware involved in that as well. And there's also going to be a server and computers used in the sending process as well. So the data is essentially going to be sent around in this process of just one item being ordered by a store. It's going to be sent around to a lot of different systems and a lot of different computers as we go throughout. So it's not just going to be that, your computer is going to be the one that goes on and makes the purchase. There's going to be a lot more to it than just that. And finally, we need to think about the data that is going to be involved here. So we need to think about what type of data would the company actually need in order to send a particular item to you. So let's try and suggest some of these things. What data would be needed in order to ship a certain item to you? Go ahead, Declan.
Like your address and stuff.
Okay, yep, so personal details like your address, your name's probably important as well so that they know who they are addressing it to. What else do they need to send an item to you? So they've got your address, they've got your name, that's the first thing. So what details would we use to pay for it? What type of things would they need for that? Because clearly it's not going to be free, so what do we need to pay for it? Okay, Rosie suggested maybe bank details. We could also use things like credit card numbers as well. Those are going to be payment, sort of grouped under payment details that would help us to pay for those things. Also, of course, we've said so far that we've got our personal details, we've got our payment details. I guess crucially, also what they need to know is what is it exactly you have purchased. So if you've gone onto a particular store and you've said, I'd like one of these red t-shirts, that's clearly what they need to send to you. You don't want to open up your order and then realize they've sent you a pair of blue pants. They need to know what it is exactly that you have actually purchased. So that's a very important piece of data as well. And finally, there's probably going to be some tracking information as well. Once it does get out and sent, so there's probably, a lot of the time we do get tracking numbers. So that's to help us track the location of the package and where it is actually going. So that is another very important thing to include. So just summing that up, the data involved in this purchase is going to be your details, and most importantly, of course, your address, payment details, what you purchased, as well as the tracking information. So that's essentially a little example there of just imagining, a bit of a larger scale information system, like something like an eBay or an Amazon, one of these large online stores, and imagining what would it involve in just one person making a purchase there. So it's important to note that this isn't the information system as a whole. We're just doing it quite small scale here because we're only really thinking about ourselves. But imagine how much data and stuff there's going to be with every single person around the world going on and buying stuff off their websites. So I don't even know, it's impossible for me to know how much stuff gets bought on eBay every day, but it's going to be an awful lot of stuff. And think about all of the different people involved in those purchases, all of the different software, all of the hardware, all of the data that's getting shared around, all of those addresses that are getting sent to various items, all those payment details going around. And you can start to see and think about how much data is actually involved in that. And obviously, if we don't organize it in a meaningful way, it's going to get lost and it's not going to be very, very useful. So we do need to take careful management of our data, and that's clearly where the information system comes in. So we'll just quickly think about one more example before we continue to move on. So the next example we're just going to think about is, let's just imagine, first of all, before we do that, I did forget to actually skip over to this slide. So remember, the definition of a information system, what we got to at the very start of the lesson, was that an information system was a system of people and computers that process information for a specific purpose. And we said that that was a very general definition to begin with here. But let's just have a think about the example that we have just gone through and done. So in the example, what we did is we looked at everything involved in processing your order. That's going to be the information that we're talking about there. So we're processing information. All of that information involved in processing your order is going to be the information that we're going to need. So it's going to be the things like the address, the payment, the stock that's going to be in the store, what it is you've purchased. All of those things is going to be the information that we need. And that would allow you to receive that item at the door. So that's going to be the specific purpose that we're talking about. So we're processing all of that payment and data information for the purpose to be so that you can actually receive that item there. So that's essentially the role of an information system. We're trying to use our data in a meaningful way so that various things can get done. So let's now move on to one more example. So I'd like you to think back to your app task that you obviously have worked on last term. So imagine what you have created in your app task or your task 2. So let's think about what people, procedures, hardware, software, and data have helped you to interact in order to complete that particular task. So we should be able to tick these off a lot more quickly this time. So what people were involved in your app task? Declan saying not sure. Somebody else? What people are going to be we're going to be involved in you creating that app? So you've created this app. You've obviously gone through a whole process in doing so. What people were involved in you creating that app? So there should be two fairly obvious ones to get to start with. One of them's going to be yourself. If we think about it closely, a person that's going to be involved in that app is going to be yourself, because you've actually going to be the one that has actually created it. And Darcy, you do have the other one here. Darcy has also suggested the teacher, because I've given you the resources that you needed to in order to create your app. Yeah, and I gave you the task. So that's, those are two people involved in that. But there's going to be other people involved as well. There's all the people involved in actually creating App Machine, which is the thing that we used. So all of the people involved in creating that piece of software is going to be, involved in your task as well. So although you don't have direct chatting with these people from App Machine, essentially, they have created what you have used in order to complete your task. So they are important people involved as well. Also, if you've done any testing of your app and you sent a survey around, or you asked people to have a look at your app and see whether or not it would be useful, all of those people are going to be involved in the task as well. They haven't specifically helped you to create it, but they might have given you some helpful suggestions that you might have then used to do some things with your app, maybe make some changes. So they're all going to be involved as well. Now, as for the procedures involved were going to be things like, the steps that we've gone through in class to show you how to do various things in App Machine. How we might go ahead and plan an app. So some of the things that we've done in lesson, some of the things that we've done, you might have read on tutorials online. And there's going to be procedures as well that the computer's going to follow in order to actually go through the process of creating the app. So the people who programmed App Machine will have made it such that they can go on and, and basically you going through the certain procedures that they follow is actually going to create a fully functional app when you have finished. Hardware and software is obviously going to involve your computer and your programs and anything involved in that. And finally, we have the data involved in the task. Now, the data is probably not going to be too much here. You're obviously going to have the data that you've taken from, the open access website and various other things. So all of that data you obviously want to display on your app, but also there's going to be data involved maybe in your survey if you have distributed around your survey. So there's going to be data that you might have collected there that you might have put to meaningful use. And there also might be data that you have received in planning your app as well, and thinking about some of the different types of things that you would want to use. So you can start to see what we can basically view anything as an information system, anything that we have created, and think about all of those different things that might be involved in it. So what's important to note though is it does not necessarily mean that one online order or your app task is an information system in itself. It's obviously part of a much larger information system. So in terms of one online order, we're talking about a much larger information system that could be a big website like an eBay or an Amazon. Whereas in your app task, we're talking about one particular app in the whole realm of App Machine that you have basically created. So that's not the whole information system, it's just one little part of it. And generally, we view little parts of information systems rather than viewing the whole system, because it's much easier for us to visualize the information system by thinking about something that we can relate to. If I asked you to think about every single person involved in every single eBay order that gets made in a day, we can't really do that because we can't really picture it in our head until we start to think about it a little bit more widely. So that's why we start small. We think about, okay, what would be involved if we made a purchase? And then once we've sort of thought about all of those people and procedures and hardware and software and data that might be involved, we can then start to think about, okay, well, let's imagine that 5 people make a purchase. Let's imagine that 100 people make a purchase. Let's imagine that 1,000 people are making a purchase. And you can start to think about how all of that snowballs and continues on. So the information system as a whole is generally going to be this very, very big thing. So that's why we try and view things a bit more small scale here, because if we view things very large scale, we're going to get very lost and very confused. So one final thing we do need to mention before we finish up today is about your task 4. Now, of course, task 3's due date has now been and gone. It was due at the end of last week. I have received a lot of those already up onto Moodle, so thank you for everybody who has handed those up already. Task 4 we are going to introduce today, and it's going to be your homework for this week and obviously for the next few weeks. Your role is essentially to investigate how Open Access College uses DAMAP as an information system. So essentially, if you think about it, you think about us as a school, Open Access, you think about all of the data that we have collected, all of that data appears essentially in DAMAP. We have all of your personal data in there, we have all of your report data, all of your grades, all of your marks, all of your history as well. So is all going to be stored in DAMAP. So DAMAP is the best example of an information system that gets used at Open Access College. So you basically need to investigate how it essentially works. So you can actually present this in any way you like. It's actually going to be quite an open assignment. So you can make a PowerPoint explaining essentially how DAMAP works and how all of the things involved in the information system come together. You could write a report about it if you prefer to write things down in a written format. You could also present your findings in a recorded oral if that's what you wanted to do. So basically you can really do anything as long as you try and you do some investigation and you basically go through and have a look at how this actually works. So more specifically, let's have a look at the task sheet to give ourselves a little bit more information here. So we can see that this task is due on December the 3rd, and I actually forgot to check before the lesson whether or not that would be still okay, because I haven't actually checked to see when reports are due, because that is an important thing. Yeah, that's actually still going to be okay. So December the 3rd will be the due date for this. That is, for those of you who don't know, that is the end of week 7. So essentially in about 4 weeks' time. So as we can see from the description, it's basically the same thing that we've basically just learned. Your role is to investigate how Open Access College uses DAMAP as an information system. So as you no doubt know, we use DAMAP to store student information. We also use it to timetable lessons, so all your timetables are up there and you can see what classes you are into. It also allows teachers to monitor student progress, so we can see when you're attending, when you're not attending, how you've been going with various tasks. You can also go on there and upload work. We can also use it to communicate student results, so we give out our reports using DAMAP. And also we can use DAMAP to help keep parents aware of student progress. So there's lots and lots of different things that we use in DAMAP to basically do all of these different things. So all of the data gets loaded in there, and then we use DAMAP for all of these purposes. So clearly, there's going to be several people, procedures, hardware, software, and data involved in making the information system work as it currently does. So you're going to be trying to investigate DAMAP, having a little bit more of a look into how it works, and trying to basically do an investigation showing of how DAMAP works. And importantly, it's not just this is DAMAP and this is how we use it. You're supposed to be showing me here basically how it works as an information system. So how all of this data comes together, how it actually all works and comes together in that. So basically what you need to assume here is that you need to assume that the person reading your investigation has no knowledge of Open Access College, DAMAP, or even basic computer knowledge. So basically assume that you're going to be explaining everything to them. So you're going to need to say to them, this DAMAP is a piece of software that we can access online. We go to this website. So you're basically describing the school, you're describing what the school does, how the DAMAP is used in the school, and all of those basic things. So you're not just describing how DAMAP works, but you're also describing all of the extra stuff as well. And everything here is going to need to be written in your own words. So in summary, you are going to be marked on this assignment on the content, structure, and the language that is going to be used in your investigation. So that is essentially your assignment there. It is obviously a lot more open than the previous assignments that you have done. So, there might be a fair bit to it. You might want to start thinking about, though, for your homework this week, how you might set that out and how you might actually do that investigation. Because, I'd expect some of you might not know a huge amount about DAMAP just yet, especially if you are fairly new to the school. So, for those people, what could you do to maybe find out a little bit more about DAMAP? What could we do to find a little bit more out about it? Go ahead, Declan.
Actually use it and investigate it and like press buttons and like try and find things and press settings and
Yep.
press like marks and stuff.
Yep, okay, so you can obviously log into your own Daymap account and find all of those things out, see the type of information that is stored there for you, see the type of information that you can access as well. So, actually just messing around with it a little bit yourself is going to be really, really important. You can also maybe have a look at what your parents see on Daymap, because your parents are going to see slightly different things to what you can see. So they're going to be able to see, I think from my understanding is the parent view is quite different from the student view. Now, one thing you're not going to be able to see is the teacher's view, which is going to be different again. But you can clearly try and work out what are some of the things that the teachers are going to use Daymap for. I've already told you a lot of the things in there, so you can start to think about, okay, well, the teachers use it to timetable lessons. So how is it that, for example, I knew that all of you were free at this time? So, that's something you could investigate. How would I know that information? How would I know, for example, that a certain student is going to be away on a certain week? Or how do I know that I can go on there and I can see that a student has uploaded some work? So all of that thing there, you need to basically investigate yourself. And you can feel free to ask me questions at any stage if you're not really sure about how something works, and I'd be more than happy to help you through this task. But that is definitely something you could start thinking about and start working through over the coming weeks. So that brings us to the end of our lesson today. Your homework for this week is to start thinking about and beginning your task 4. And I'm more than happy if you want to show me what you've done so far, or whether or not you're on the right track. I'm more than happy for you to send me via email and just say, hey, is this okay? Am I on the right track here? I'm more than happy for you to show me that, and I can help you through the task at any stage as well. Also, be sure, if you haven't done so already, to hand up your third task, which of course was your survey. As I said, I've had a lot of those submitted already. If you haven't submitted it yet, please do try and get it up onto Moodle as soon as you can. So thank you for coming today, everybody. I hope you have enjoyed the lesson. As I said, any questions about the task, please feel free to ask, and I'll see you all again in lesson next week.